Now, I also agree, and I think, as Abba said, the whole class agrees, that injecting values into the globalized system, since we're fast approaching a time when competition for resources is going to make it dangerous, is a good idea. But if we were to think of this class as a workshop to come up with a list of actions as to how we would implement this, I don't think I would be very productive, because I've been thinking about ways to implement this, the injection of values into the system, and the closest I think one of the readings gets to it is the one by Johnston about Realpolitik. And he brings the idea of a faith-based diplomat or a religious attaché. And if we were to have this idea on the table and see if it was a way of implementing this injection, do you think it's applicable, or can it be seen as an infringement even upon sovereignty, because you're bypassing political measures and appealing on a personal level by appointing someone religious who will have a predominantly political mission, in my view? And if you think this is not applicable or not a good way, then how can we actually implement your vision?
Yeah, I don't think it is a particularly good way. I mean, I don't think you're going to get very far by appointing, which is why I thought it was a bit of a strange idea to have a sort of religious attaché. Sort of
It wasn't fully persuasive.
No, it would certainly give, because you're used to dealing at embassies with various strange named attachés that usually turn out to have a technological expertise that's got very little to do with if you know what I mean. That would be a good one, actually. That would definitely be one role for the religious attaché.
So how do we...
It would confuse the enemy. No, I think you see how you bring this in is you talk about the values, and I say this, I always emphasize this, it doesn't have to come through religious faith, but it's just that the values that are associated with religious faith at its best are values that lend themselves to, for example, tackling global poverty in Africa, climate change, isolating extremists and terrorists, and actually I would argue even to making your economic system work better. So I would say that the way of doing this is not actually to try and rerun these debates through the prism of religious doctrine, but on the contrary, to say actually the only way that we are going to make the world work and solve these problems is through these strong values guiding the process of resolution of these challenges. You see what I mean?
I do, but on a tangible view, like, who do we address and how do we go about doing it? And like, globalization has many aspects, from global investment management, let's say, to like relations between certain nations. So there's a political aspect, there's an economic aspect, or there's social relations. How, like, when provided that we agree on the values, and I do agree with you when you say that there are universal values coming from within the faiths that we can use for this to this end. How do we do this on a policy basis? How do we make this an agenda for ourselves?
Well, we make an agenda for ourselves, for example. I mean, just to take the issue to do with climate change. We've got a major problem to do with climate change. And the problem is very, very simple. China and India are going to industrialize hundreds of millions of their people, and will engage in industrialization about 4 or 5 times the equivalent of that of the United States of America, and about 5 times the speed. So, and they're going to do it, right? But they want to do it responsibly. They prefer to do it responsibly and sustainably, but they've got to lift their people out of poverty. For the West, is really worried that if what we do is we take a whole lot of action on climate change, supposing we start to change our economies, supposing we tax certain environmental bads in order to discourage the behavior, we worry we're going to end up being uncompetitive with these countries as they industrialize. So they're going to get a free ride on our back. Right. Now, you cannot resolve this issue, in my view, unless you start from a basic principle that this is a global community problem and it cannot be resolved on the basis of interests, narrowly defined, but rather has to be resolved on the basis of equity, which means, for example, we share technology that we develop, we partner, we encourage, we make sure that, for example, with deforestation and large parts of the world that are being deforested, when this is a major part of the climate change problem, we have to intervene, we have to be prepared to fund the intervention that is going to be necessary. Right now, none of this can be done, in my view, without the concept of equity in it. So what I would say is that, you know, faith-based politics at its best says we import these values to the solution of this problem. Now, you've still got to work out what's your best cap and trade system, the technical details of how the clean development mechanism works, how technology transfer can be associated with intellectual property rights. All of that has to be done. You know, don't misunderstand me. It has to be, and you know, there's no point in hiring the vicar in to kind of advise on it. But you know, if you take, for example, as I know you studied before, the Jubilee 2000 campaign, you know, this was a mobilization of faith for a purpose. And in my view, incidentally, in time to come, people will look back at that moment, because actually I think there have been some very interesting changes in Africa that arose out of that, as a moment at which the world got into a different relationship with Africa. So, is it?
Yeah, that's clarified for me.